Hello, everyone, and welcome to this short film Q&A for Encounters Documentary Film Festival 2021. My name is Hannah Fleisch, and I'm one of the interns at this year's Encounters Festival. I'm joined today by Teboho Edkins, the director of the short film Shepherds, showing at this year's festival. Teboho Edkins was born in 1980 in Tennessee, USA, and grew up in Southern Africa, currently living and working in Cape Town and Berlin. He studied photography and fine art in Cape Town and film in France, followed by a degree in directing at the German Film and Television Academy in Berlin. Teboho's films have shown as part of group and solo exhibitions and at over 500 film festivals, including the International Film Festival Berlin, International Short Film Festival in Oberhausen, and the International Film Festival in Rotterdam. They have also been acquired by several public and private art collections. Some of his latest works include The Orphanage in 2021, Shepherds and Days of Cannibalism in 2020, and I Am Sheriff in 2017. Shepherds explores the experience of a number of shepherds in a prison for stealing cattle in the mountains of Lesotho, isolated from the rest of the world and missing both their work and their cows. The film is both subtle and beautifully artistic, with personal interviews that reveal the different relationships between cows and people, specifically to do with the significance of cattle in the social, cultural, and economic fabric of the community. Teboho, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for the introduction.
Of course. Now, jumping straight into some of your work, you're able to capture some very intimate portraits of the communities and the landscapes in South Africa. As South Africans, I think I really appreciate the imagery that you're able to portray. What has pulled you to some of these stories and spaces specifically?
I think, first of all, I'm more interested in spaces than stories. I usually am more attracted to a space, and within the space I find a story. And then what I'm really interested in is people and their humanity. So I think I find a space and I meet the people and I explore their humanity. And then I find a frame in which to make my film, sort of a conceptual frame. And Shepherds builds on a sort of portrait frame or portrait style of filmmaking that I made already with Gangsters in Cape Town, another film in 2013 called Gangster Backstage, and they're sort of cousins. So yeah, that's how I found that's how I made this film.
Definitely. This film also deals with a lot of like issues of cattle that I know that you've also dealt with in Days of Cannibalism. How did you find the themes evolving in this film, and what kind of insights do you think that talking to like ex-shepherds in prison brought about that dynamic?
Well, I met the prison the shepherds as I was making the film Days of Cannibalism, and I was really interested in the idea of cows and the importance of cattle, especially in this rural community, and how traditionally cows are an extension of one's selfhood. One becomes more of a person through one's animals, and in particular cows. So when you steal someone else's cattle, it's an act of cannibalism. You take part of their body in almost physical sense. So a cattle raid and cattle theft is a much more fundamental act of violence you inflict on other people than just stealing, I don't know, something material. And so I was exploring these ideas and the meaning of cattle for people, and the changing of the meaning of cattle, of how the meaning of the animals is changing now because of Chinese investment in the area. And I came across this prison, and I found out that most of the prisoners are cattle thieves. There are a few sort of, I don't know, murderers and murderers and sex offenders in the prison, and some housebreaking, but I think over 50% of the inmates are cattle thieves. And it's this sort of prison that's sort of marooned in the very center of the country, surrounded by mountains, and I mean cinematically just a perfect place. And then I found out that generally if you get a year of prison for stealing a cow. That's the sort of the rule is you're sentenced to 1 year of prison per cow you steal. So that means that the prisoners or the inmates I was filming with have been in the prison for a very, very long time. And I was quite interested in my film in trying to show a space where the time just stands still. And my characters sort of float around the space a bit like ghosts. And the challenge was to make a film in a space where nothing happens, which is basically kind of the prison's almost suspended in the air within these mountains, and the people there within it. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to make.
Completely. I think one of the things that I found so interesting specifically was the settlements that they make for themselves within the prison.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you got any other kind of insights about what life was like in prison for these people specifically, because I think that really went against a lot of my assumptions about what being in prison or in jail was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was pretty much the first thing that struck me, and that was what made me want to make a film. There was the fact that they were allowed to build in Sutu, you call them mutibong, these little kettle posts. So they build these mutibong within the prison as a sort of safe space themselves. So they bring the outside world into the prison, and I thought that was quite a beautiful holistic approach, also on the part of the prison authorities, to let them build these kettle posts. And then over time they've started building or having herds in the prison as well. So they're recreating the cattle posts within the prison and are creating small herds of cows within the prison that they take care of. And I thought that was very beautiful, in fact. And that was the beginning, and that was why I decided to make the film there, really. And then as I started making the interviews with the shepherds, I mean, I speak Sesotho, and I grew up in Lesotho, so I have a certain ease in communication. But it was quite difficult to kind of strike a conversation until I asked them about their animals. And then, that was a sort of vocabulary that they could really use, and these wonderfully beautiful phrases that they use to describe the animals and the importance of the animals for them. So I think often I try to find the right vocabulary to speak with the people that I'm making my film with. When I was making the gangster film, for instance, I would speak about prison for a gangster in Cape Town, and that was a reality they could talk about. And with the shepherds, it was the reality that they could speak about is their animals, and how they dream of them and how they miss them, and it's just beautiful.
Completely. I know that all of the interviews were done with specific like ex or former shepherds. Were there any insights kind of in conversations with any of the guards or any of the other prisoners that you got about how people who steal cattle are perceived by kind of an outside world?
Well, I think there's a sort of, they all know that stealing cattle is wrong, and there's a sort of a tremendous serenity that they have in that they accept their fate. Even though it might seem incredibly harsh to the outsider that you get a year of prison per cow you steal, it's sort of the rule that is accepted, and they do not fight against it. They're not sort of in anger. They're sort of like they've accepted their judgment, and I think that has kind of created a sort of almost harmonious sort of, well, I don't want to say that there's a kind of a harmony in the place with the prison guards, which has to do with the sort of fact that everyone accepts this law that the cows are so important that 1 year of prison per cow is just, and then they don't feel hard done by it, and there's a sort of empathy that the guards have towards them because they know that they stole because, but the rules are such, and one accepts that. There's this beautiful story that the guards told me that, in fact, the prison did not used to have a fence was just a kind of a cluster of houses, you know, in this little valley, and there was no fence around it, and no one ever escaped until the day that someone decided that they had to build a fence, you know, and the fence was built. And I think in that year they had a whole lot of escapees. So the fence, you know, the fact that they were fenced in created this sort of, you know, sense of confinement and stress that they had to escape, you know. So maybe that was not such a good idea.
Yeah, you really get the sense that it's like a world within a world, because it's just this kind of microcosm, and it's just like amongst these like beautiful like landscapes, but there is like a very, I guess, like solemn tone and atmosphere to it because of I guess like missing the cattle, but also like sitting with what you're doing. And I think it's a really interesting insight on like what punishment can look like in conjunction with the crime.
I mean, it's not, you know, it's, I mean, they miss their families, you know, they're you know, they're not happy being in prison. And I think I did try to also understand that, or like help try to show that by imprisoning these people for such a long time, you basically take them out of society and putting them in this suspended space, you know, even if they're not suffering as such, you know, they've become ghosts, you know, they're like, they just sort of float about, you know, and that's what I tried to show in my film. Yeah.
Completely. I was wondering if you've extended on any of these like themes or completely departed from them in any of your future work, and kind of what projects we have to look forward to.
That's a nice question. Well, there's a sort of a kind of a, I like to make or I'm exploring the idea of making documentaries that have a genre, you know, like the Days of Cannibalism is a Western, and before that I made a gangster film, which was a documentary. And Shepherds is also, in a way, it's a Western. It's filmed in CinemaScope, you know, it's even though it's a documentary, it's got a genre. So I'm thinking of trying to make a horror documentary. And I have a kind of a community and a place which I've been researching, and it also have to do with the sort of, it's a space where kind of nature encroaches around, and people kind of have this very ambivalent relationship to nature, and it's sort of kind of dark side is coming up, but very atmospheric, and yeah.
Completely. Well, I'm very looking forward to that. That sounds wonderful. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I completely loved your film, and I can't wait for everyone at the festival to see it.
Great. Yeah, I'm also very excited. I mean, for me, it's been difficult because the film's been finished almost a year now, and I haven't been able to show it in South Africa. And usually I would go and show it at the prison, you know, and show it to the people I made it with. I mean, and that's really important for me. But because of the travel restrictions and the sort of complicated COVID situation, it hasn't been possible. So at least this is a step in the right direction. It's going to be shown in South Africa, and then soon I'll be able to take it up to the mountains and show it to the shepherds.
Completely. I am looking forward to hearing that story as kind of an extension of the documentary too.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank the Encounter sponsors and partnerships who've helped to make this festival happen. And thank you all for watching. You can find out more info about the festival by following us on social media and checking out our website at www.encounters.co.za. Encounters will see you virtually everywhere.